What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Bear Fishing. Today we are doing something different. It's not necessarily an episode, but we are doing a live stream for the first time. By we, I mean myself and my new friend that I met through the Vermont fishing community, Mike from Binya Outdoors. He's a big kayak fishing guy, introduced me to that world as well. Right away, I'll just tell you what we're talking about today. We're talking about fishing on a budget, fishing affordability. So, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself.
So, as you said, I'm Mike. I'm from Vermont. I have a YouTube channel, had it for a little while. I actually originally was going to be a tournament director and decided not to do it and just fish tournaments. But for the most part, been fishing since I was in a car seat and just really got a passion for bass fishing. And in New England, there's a lot more trout fishermen. So it was nice to find someone that I could talk to on here that likes to talk bass fishing. So that's kind of what we're doing here now, is just getting on here and talking fishing, I guess.
For sure. And that's why I want to welcome everyone and make sure that everyone knows that leave your comments anywhere. Nothing's a stupid question. Nothing's a stupid comment. We're here to learn off of each other and learn from other people and grow together as fishermen. So I just want to make that point very clear. So without further ado, we may start our topic for tonight, which is fishing on a budget. And if you're new to fishing, if you're looking to get into it, I guess we're the guys. We've done it before. We've been there. We're not multimillionaires, so technically we still do fish on a budget, even though we have the gadgets. You could tell I got the rod rack here, I got the perch mounted. That's all extra money that you don't need to start fishing. So, Mike, get started.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to just fishing in general is that you have to have an $80,000 bass boat and you have to have Shimano Curados and Daiwa Tattoo the reels. And I can personally tell you that my biggest fish on both species, smallmouth and largemouth, came on Walmart rods. I have expensive gear. I have cheap gear. But I can tell you that this sport does not have to be done with $500 rods and an $80,000 bass boat. When I started doing it, and Matt's going to be doing the same thing. You start out in a kayak, you start out on the bank. Anyone that watches your channel knows you just go to a bank and cast and catch fish. You do not have to have the best quality gear in order to catch fish. And I think that's one of the biggest points that I like to make to people is that a Yum Dinger and a Yamamoto Senko are basically the same thing, but the difference is about $6 a package. So
Right.
kind of keep that in mind.
So we'll make just a specific comparison here. The Gary Yamamoto, I don't know how much they are in the States, but I think it's $8 or $9 for 10.
Yeah.
It's around that. And you can get 10 for $10, you can get like 30 or 40 Yum Dingers. Okay, maybe the quality is not the same, but you'll still catch bass, and some days you'll actually catch more on the Yum Dingers. But just another point is like my favorite rod is the reel is the Fluger President. Doesn't matter what rod it's on. I like the way that thing flies a bait out. So that being said, that is not expensive, and I've caught all of my fish, and obviously that means my PBs on this reel. So I'm not talking. And that's another point to make clear here. We're not talking down on the expensive stuff because it does work well. It's not that it doesn't work well. It's just the fact that you don't need it to get fish in the boat or kayak or in my case on the bank. I guess you can continue on that point. Now we got comments. Caught a 40-inch pike, Barbie rod. Okay, that there's YouTubers that
case in point right there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
sure.
it's actually impressive to me sometimes when you see these guys pull onto the boat ramp. Now, I started out kayak fishing in a Sun Dolphin. I don't know if you're familiar with this brand. It's a Walmart brand sit-in kayak. It is $200, brand new. I have literally been fishing next to guys in $90,000 bass boats, and they're using all high-end, ridiculous gear rods, ridiculous gear stuff, and ultimately they're not catching anything. And I'm right next to them in a $200 kayak using a Shakespeare ugly stick and pulling in 3-pounders. So I think a lot of the biggest misconceptions is that there's a lot of guys that think that they have to have a certain kind of line, a certain rod and reel because they watch the pros. And don't get me wrong, I would love to be a sponsored angler. I would love to have gear given to me for free. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm only going to exclusively use a certain line or a certain hook or a certain snap or reel.
Exactly.
Because if you can afford it and it gets you on the water, then you can catch fish with it. If you can't afford it, then you're not catching fish with what you can't afford. So there's no point in spending. To be honest, I've bought in both levels. I've bought in one of my favorite reels is an Abu Garcia Black Max. That combo with a rod is about $50. And that's the reel and rod all together. And you usually get them for like $50, $60. Maybe a little bit more with cost of living increases and stuff like that lately, supply chain issues. But still, for $60, I still use them. I've had them for 5 years.
Right.
I've got Daiwa Tatula that I've already had to replace. And that's $190 reel. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
My 6-month-old puppy found a bottle. So hold on one second.
Oh, good.
Hey.
All right, guys, stay tuned. That's actually bringing us to a whole different point that we'll get to once he sits back down. There he is. Okay, there he goes. A good point. Speaking on this topic about how it isn't really important what kind of gear you have, but I think really what is important about fishing is understanding. And Mike, I know I'm waiting for you. I know you're going to agree with me on this. Understanding where these fish are located. You can be on an $80,000 bass store. You can have a $500 combo. You can have 10 $500 combos. You don't know what they're biting, and you don't know where to catch them. And the guy with his little John boat with his little 1980 motor, and he knows where these largemouth are holding and these smallmouths. He's going to catch the fish, and he's going to win that tournament. Doesn't matter how much you invested in that boat and rod reel. If he knows where the fish are and he knows how they're biting, which brings us to another whole topic of fish behavior, well, then you're going to catch the fish over that guy.
See, I think that's actually probably the most valid point of this whole topic is that guys think that just because it's a $9 worm versus the $1.99 worm in the bargain bin at Walmart, that one is automatically going to catch fish regardless of the situation. That's not true. So in my opinion, I would rather take that $9 and buy $9 store worms that are a different color and be able to adjust to the situation, the water clarity, and be able to adjust to the conditions than have one pack of one color of the big bad brand and then not be able to accommodate for that situation. Because really, that's why I think this sport is more addicting than any other sport I've ever done in my life. Because I was saying this before, unlike baseball, unlike football, our ball moves. Our ball has a brain and can avoid us. So we have to adapt to the weather conditions, the wind, the rain, the sun, the wind, the everything about it, temperature.
Yep.
And if you can't have, and I'm not saying, and this is kind of going to sound contradictory, but I'm also not saying don't buy every damn color that they have available because you'll go broke doing that.
Point. Yeah, then we'll just be going against the point of what we're talking about. So you know what? I don't want to cut you off from your point, but let's talk practically. If you want to start fishing, what would you recommend? And then I'll give my piece too. So let's say you're someone who just doesn't know much about it, and you want to target bass because that's another point to make. This target species, right?
Literally have a video series coming out because of this topic, because I've talked to so many people that think that they need to start with a bait caster and they need to start with crankbaits and chatterbaits. No, what you need is you need a package of green pumpkin yum dingers,
here we go,
black and blue fleck yum dingers, an EWG hook, and if you want me to give you a specific rod and reel to go buy, go to your local tackle store and they will have a Shakespeare ugly stick with a spinning reel called the GX2. It's a black and red reel. It's usually a black rod. That combo, I think, costs you $30, and it usually comes with line depending on where you buy it. If not, throw some monofilament on it, and you can go catch bass with that on the bank. You can go catch bass with that in a kayak. I fish at basically the same kind of setup in my boat, in my kayak. That's all you need to start catching bass. And you're probably going to spend $60
And I'll even say 10-pound mono if you want to go
Yeah.
cheap about it. Go 10-pound mono, and on top of that, it's about. We should also talk about like what do fish eat, and we had this side discussion. I don't even know if it was on live. They eat minnows. They
Yep.
eat craws. Now we're talking northeast bass diet.
Right.
They eat minnows. They eat craws. We can say they eat baby birds. I've never seen it, but I know they do.
Done it.
So do pike, which we have. So be careful. And is there anything else? Maybe worms, but worms I don't really see how they fly in the
Frogs.
water. Frogs is the big one. So
Definitely
there you have
frogs.
your diet. You have frogs, minnows, craws, and birds, right?
To be honest, a bass will eat anything that pisses it off, to be fair. But that's actually something that we've talked about before too, is we humanize bass too much and we think that bass have this like elitist mentality that they're just not going to eat a certain bait. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes it can be just a slight variation of color, a slight difference in the bait. But overall, like everybody thinks that they need to, and I think a lot of it has to do with, and I will take some blame for it. They watch me on YouTube, they watch Matt on YouTube, they watch Tactical Bassin, and they see us start pulling fish in with a jerk bait. They see us pulling fish in with a chatterbait, and they go, "Oh, I got to go get those."
Yeah, it's
Those
big
are
and
awesome to
shiny.
have, and they're situational baits. But if you do not have a setup yet, if you're getting into the sport, start with worms. Start with plastic worms,
Absolutely.
and that's all you need. You can literally go catch bass tomorrow with those baits.
Yep. So I mean that's for bass really. So we talked about the diet. I think as a beginner, something that I was only introduced to years after, which spent me a lot of money on fluorescent colored lures and everything like that. There's actually two things: water clarity,
Yep.
and as well as the time of year and where these bass are located. If you don't know
Yep.
where they are, I'm not gonna. I'll keep saying it if I have to. You won't catch them.
Right.
So I don't know where I am, my neck of the woods. There's no woods. The water clarity is it's non-existent basically. So the darker stuff does better. Once again, depending on the time of year. From my experience in Vermont, I like to use more natural colored baits. So if you do want to get yourself a pair of a thing of plastic worms, like you said, a green pumpkin isn't bad because it still has that flake if you want the flake. But the time of year is important too. So if you want to maybe elaborate on that and where, because you fish from the kayak, so where are you moving in those depths with your fish finder to find those fish?
Time of the year is it varies. So at the beginning of the year, and this is where you have to understand the life cycle of a bass. So at the beginning of the year, when most people start bass fishing, most people, when I say most people, I'm trying to single out guys like me have considered going out next weekend when there's still ice on most lakes. So we're not in that category of most people. So we're trying to like get out there really early. But your typical bass fisherman in the Northeast is going to start fishing around May. Most of us start around beginning of May, Mother's Day weekend. From there forward is usually when the weather finally is at a point. Those bass are looking to do one major thing at that time of year, and that's spawn. Bass spawn typically in shallower water, but during the winter months, they actually go out deep. And the reason why they do that is because the water temperature stays stable. So bass are cold blooded, they can't regulate their own body temperature. So they stay in the deeper water because that water is always going to stay 37 degrees. It doesn't have the sun influencing it, it doesn't have the wind influencing it. So you have a consistent temperature. When the spring hits, those bass start moving from their deeper water and they start coming shallow. So when I start out, and that's why I say start fishing with a worm, because the good thing
Mm,
about a worm is it happens all season. But when those fish are coming in shallow, they have been pretty much doing the same thing that bears do. A lot of people don't realize that bass have a slow metabolism. They still eat throughout the winter, but they go from basically eating 5, 6 times a day in the summertime to eating once every couple of days in the
yep.
wintertime. So when they hit that spawn, now they're ravenous because when they spawn, they don't eat. So they gorge themselves in the
Before.
springtime before they go to spawn. So to be honest, they're going to eat just about anything that drops in front of them. And the best things actually to use at that time of year is worms or craw style baits, like your
Okay.
rage craws
Yep.
or anything like that. Now, I've been doing some research on this, and I haven't personally seen it in the Northeast. And I'm going to actually ask you, I'm going to go to you on this one. What's your experience with using like the red and orange
I can't
craws?
get one. I can't get one to stick, even on a lipless.
Yeah, I
I
can't
can't
either.
get one. But I do have, I'll defer with you on one point in the sense that I use a lot of cranks in May
Yep.
in shallow water and they kill it. So if you do want to go the extra mile and get yourself a hard bait if you're starting out, crankbaits would, in my opinion, is the best
Yep.
because you don't have to twitch it like you would a jerk bait. You just sauce
Yep.
it out there, you throw it out there, and you just reel with your rod tip down or up depending on the vegetation. But simply in the middle, just reel it in and let it do the work. It's just going to move side to side. It mimics a fatter bait fish. I like the fat crankbaits. And like you were saying, those fish are trying to get fat before they spawn because they won't be eating during the spawn. So yeah, it's just a little side point. I do like the crankbaits, but I can't stick one on a red or orange. The
See, and
craw
I have a
sorry.
buddy. I've had a buddy that uses that like fire tiger, or not fire, the fire craw chatterbait, those like bright orange, blaze orange. I'm experimenting with it. I actually made some plastics this year to try to play around with that. They
Mhm.
say that color works, so I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I haven't had a ton of experience fishing them in general because I have my basic go-to colors, but I'm going to be trying those this year. The crankbait thing's a good point too. That's another detail on the budget situation. Strike King KVD crankbaits.
Oh, can't go wrong. I
They're
catch all my
cheap
fish on that.
and they work really well. The other ones that really work well, and you'd be surprised, is actually the cotton cordell ones at Walmart. Those things are cheap, but they do work. The problem with those, I will say, I don't normally disparage a brand. Change the hooks out. Change the split rings and the hooks on those cotton cordells because those hooks suck and
And
they
those
will
are
bend out.
little details that go a long way when your PB's on the line and you lose
Yep.
it because of a crappy hook.
So it's and it sounds like at the end of the day, you're better off with like a Strike King bait because you're probably okay with not changing out the hardware. To be honest, most crankbaits, when you buy them, their hardware kind of sucks. The only bait I can tell you that the hardware is usually good out of the box is Berkeley. Berkeley puts those Fusion 19 hooks on all of their stuff, which is literally their top brand hook. But you can use one of my favorite liplesses to use is the Cotton Cordell. And it's cheap. And you buy them at Walmart for $3.
Hmm.
Um,
Just
why I
for
say that is because you can go buy Rapala,
BMC.
but you're
Yeah,
going to
that's
pay $10 for a square bill, whereas you could buy a KVD for 6.
yeah, exactly.
Depending
Yeah, I was
on
gonna
sometimes depending on if you go to the right store. If you go to like a Dick's Sporting Goods or a Walmart, a lot of times they'll have those clearance baskets and there'll
yeah,
be square bills and crankbaits in those baskets,
like 5 for 5. Yeah, you could
and
do
you'll
some
get a deal
damage
on
there.
them. So
Yeah, that's a good point to make. We could get into water clarity and which color to choose and that. So what do we got now? We got rods done. Rod reel combo. Don't start buying rods and reels separate if you're new to fishing and you're fishing on a budget,
start
because
with
then it
combos.
starts getting expensive. We're talking worms for bass specifically. Another good point. If you're in the Northeast and you're going out fishing, you're gonna have the pike and you're gonna have the bass. And worms have worked for pike when you're not targeting them and it'll take your line off. But crankbaits is a killer for pike.
Yep.
So it's not like you're only going for bass. You can catch. Actually, I go out for pike sometimes, and I specifically use a crankbait.
Crankbaits. You know what's funny about crankbaits is that, and this is what doesn't make any sense to me, is you take like a 2.5 KBD and you'll catch a 30-inch pike, but you'll also catch a 4-inch perch. You'll catch a 6-inch rock bass. You'll catch trout at
Yep.
times, depending on the time of year. That's what's cool about the crankbait. Like, and when we say crankbait, mostly we're talking square bill. They do have crankbait's kind of a generic term, so I don't want to confuse everybody too much. crankbait is basically a hard plastic bait that usually has some sort of shaped bill on the front. It's either the rounded ones tend to dive deeper, the square ones tend to be shallower. There's a little bit of a difference between those types of baits, but when we say fishing term, generally a crankbait is usually a square bill, is usually what we're talking about, or a lipless, but that's a different category altogether.
Right.
So those are fish catchers. It has no difference. And the cool thing about a crankbait too is you can actually troll them too. If you want to, and you're in a kayak, you don't even have to cast and reel them. You can actually just throw them out into a current and just drag them.
And that depends on the size of the bill as well. So, I mean, you get technical too, like like walleye trolling to get them in deeper water. Those things will troll at like 15, 20 feet. But in general, this ties back to the point that what do fish feed on? Smaller fish,
Exactly.
right? And what does a square bill crankbait look like? And another thing is the sound of a square bill crankbait. There's some with rattles, like most of them are with rattles. I don't know if there's any other um, metal in them that'll make the
So
sound.
there is some cool. So there's actually and that gets into a really technical thing, so I won't confuse too many people, but there is literally major differences when it comes to sound. Is there's some that have metal BBs in them, so they'll have a lot of little BBs. Some of them will have a single big BB, and there's actually 13 Fishing makes a chatterbait square bill hybrid.
No, okay,
So it's actually the bill itself vibrates.
2 seconds. You don't need it. To make it
Don't
clear,
need it. I
you
can tell you
don't
right
need.
now, don't buy it because I've never caught a fish on it, and I own 6 of the colors of it.
There you go. There you go. And I'm not trying to put you
Keep
down.
Fishing, sorry, you still can sponsor me, but I'm gonna be honest. I bought it because I thought it's called a Jabberjaw, and I thought chatterbaits work, square bills work. This thing should work awesome. What it does is the square bill actually rocks back and forth, and what it does is it makes that bait like wobble and hunt, and you think it would work really, really well. I have yet to catch a single fish on any of them, and I put them right in after catching fish. I put them in places that I know there's fish, and
Yeah,
not success of them.
yeah. And like even to the point that like I'll still go to a Bass Pro Shops and spend all kinds of money on things that I don't need. But
Yep.
really, like a square bill crankbait, you got your worms. And now let's talk line too, because there's line that's so expensive these days. So expensive. And I'm just out here using regular mono and I'm still
Yep.
landing fish. And sometimes I don't even have to retie my baits for the next day.
Yep.
And things getting jammed under a log and I'll just pull it right out.
So, do you use just straight mono, or do you use like a braid deleter? You use straight.
I do straight. I do
So
straight.
for the
I'm still a
most
bit of
part,
a
I use braid deleter.
yeah.
But I will tell you right now, for the sake of this video, and anyone who's an experienced bass fisherman that might be watching this, you're probably gonna want to slap me, but you see that category called fluorocarbon. You, as a new fisherman, can ignore that category. It is not valuable to you. It really isn't, because there is a specific situation, there's specific conditions, and there is a necessity for that type of line. And you're going to spend $35, $40 a roll for a good roll of fluorocarbon that you're probably going to waste when you first start fishing because you're not using it for what it needs to be used. Whereas you can spend $12 on a roll of monofilament and get the same exact result. To be honest, I don't even use that much fluorocarbon. I've even gotten into my head that I need to use it, and I've tried to use it, and I have not personally seen a difference between using a mid to high grade fluorocarbon and a decent mono.
Mono.
I
No,
really
same here.
haven't seen much of a difference. Now, granted, where I fish, there is places that I fish that the water is fairly clear, but for the most part, there's some stain in most of the water in the Northeast.
Okay, now I'll add on to that point because you're being humble and you're saying okay because I fish certain circumstances, but I fish very very clear. I mean drinkable water in Vermont for
Yep.
brookies, for smallmouth, for rainbow trout. And you know my answer. I'm using mono.
Yep. Yeah,
I'm using mono.
I don't see the necessity, to be honest, of everybody brags about it and says, you know, you need to use this fluorocarbon, and you have to understand that's the thing I want to drive home is when you watch YouTube, there is a difference between a guy who is sponsored and who is really passionate about a product. And you'll know that because that guy will say to you, I use only Cast King line. That's a sponsored angler.
Oh
The
yeah.
reason why I know that is because there isn't a single angler I know, there isn't a guy that I have ever talked to that uses exclusively one brand. He'll go to the tackle store, he'll buy a brand, he'll try it, but then you'll see another brand and you'll be like, you know what? I'm going to buy that next time. And then
Yeah.
I'll buy this one next time. So most guys have a bunch of line. And actually, on a cost saving thing, one thing I highly recommend, I have a video coming out on this too, but when you put line on your reels, use a line counter because you're going to waste money if you don't. Because what happens is if you put line on your reel and you don't know how much you're putting on your reel, you're going to put too much on there, which actually makes it harder to cast. And the way the spools are designed, if you go over by 10 or 20 yards, now you've got a spool of line that's absolutely useless to you. So you'll have a 150-yard spool, but if you put 100 yards on a reel when you really only need 80,
Exactly.
now you have 50 yards on the spool left, which doesn't really get you what you need. So now you've got 50 yards of wasted line. Whereas if you use a counter, and you can do it, I've made a video about the Cast King Calibrate, which is a fancy thing, but you can literally buy these things for like $8 on Amazon. They're actually designed to count the line as it goes out. You turn them upside down, clip them on your rod, reel through it, and it will tell you how much line you're putting on your reel, because that's the biggest mistake I made. I have freaking rolls and rolls and rolls of line that I can't use because there's not enough on the spool to really put it on a reel.
Right. And if you would have counted it in the beginning, I mean, you would have known when to stop, and then you could re-spool it on a different
And you know how much you have left.
or whatever. That's a good point.
It's hard to tell what you have left.
Yeah, it is. I would like to talk about fish location, though.
Yep.
Maybe we could expand more on pike. Pike, because they're there in the Northeast, and sometimes you'll be surprised when you feel a bite and your whole bait's gone. Well, chances are it's a pike or even a muskie. So similarly to bass, these fish spawn in the spring, but they are the first to spawn after ice is out. Them and walleye. Is it a domination thing because they're the most dominant species? I don't know why, but it just is what it is. And they're usually the first fish to bite a square bill or a jerkbait when I am targeting bass in the spring. Okay,
Yep.
and that is because they're on the hunt post spawn to fill their bellies after they haven't been eating for a while. So I don't know really your experience with pike fishing, or maybe pike targeting pike in general, because I do a lot of pike fishing here in Montreal because there's a lot of pike. They don't need clean water to survive and thrive. They just need a healthy bait fish population, I assume. In terms of bait fish, I'm talking from minnows all the way to like 10-inch perch that they'll take down, including small birds, especially for pike.
Yep.
So they're kind of like the gators. That's why they call them the gators, because they'll literally eat anything that swims their way, and they like a lot of vibration. And bass, because they're a trigger fish, they also enjoy vibration. So sometimes, like we were saying, you're targeting bass and you'll catch the occasional pike. So maybe if you want to talk about that, I know that square bills work. And if you want to add one other hard bait to your collection, if you're starting off, that even catch them during the summer, I would just get a square bill, like we've been saying, and a good jerk bait. And for pike, because it's pike, the color honestly doesn't matter from my experience. So, comment on that maybe.
Yeah. So to be honest, I've never purposely targeted pike. Okay. Like I've never gone out and said I'm going to catch a pike today. That being said, like you just kind of pointed out, I have never. I don't think I've gone. I'm trying to think. Like, it's very rare that you go bass fishing and you don't hook into a pike.
Yep. Okay,
They're
where
just
you're
they
from.
eat the same thing that the bass eat. They live in the same environment that the bass live in, so they're going to be there. The jerk bait is a funny bait for me because a lot of the times where I fish is heavily vegetated, like just vegetated. I don't know if that's a word, but it's
I
you.
get it.
It's hard to fish us. You'd have to have a floating jerk bait in a lot of the places that I fish, and the grass is only 3-4 feet below the water line.
Yep.
So it's really hard to fish a jerk bait in those conditions. You can do it, but it takes a lot of work. My
So
favorite hard bait is still in the crankbait category, is actually the lipless crankbait, which is similar to a square bill, but um, the reason why is because of how I fish it. So I fish it really weird. So I fish it almost like a jig.
I was gonna say it's common here. It's common here for walleye, actually.
Yep.
So yeah.
So I'll take a lipless crankbait and I'll cast it out. I let it sink all the way to the bottom, and then I pop it, and then I let it flutter down. Now, lipless crankbaits, now you have rattle traps. There's all kinds of different types of this bait. Almost all of them have heavy amount of rattle. So they make a lot of noise. So when you pop it, what happens is they flutter up and then they flutter down. And that noise drives fish crazy. And especially during the spawn, the way bass mentality is in the spawning beginning of the year, the females are on the beds and the males are there. The males actually make the beds and then guard the beds.
Right.
And the females kind of hang out until they're ready to drop their eggs, and then the males fertilize them. The females bail. They're gone.
Mhm.
So the males stay there and guard the babies. And they're there until those babies hatch.
I actually thought it was the other way around.
Yep. No, females are gone as soon as they lay the egg. Sometimes females actually, they've done studies where females will actually sometimes even go to another bed.
Okay.
So sometimes they'll
Okay.
drop their eggs and go to a whole nother spot, but they bail. And there's actually depending on the species, sometimes even the big males will bail, and the younger, what they call fry garters, the smaller, more spunky male bass will stay around. And from what I understand, and I'm not exactly a biologist, and we actually want to have a biologist on here to ask these kind of questions too, but from what research I've done, bass actually literally go from laid eggs to hatched in like 4 days.
Yep.
But that male doesn't eat, he doesn't leave the nest, and he is like a pit bull in a junkyard over that nest. Anything that gets near that nest, he is going to kill it. He's not even going to eat it. And if you watch it, if you ever seen this, like if you've ever been over a bed and you drop a bait in, they will zoom in and they'll sit there and they'll look at it. And it's like they're trying to intimidate it. And then they'll bump it with their nose. I've actually literally seen them pick baits up
And
and
move
then
them.
drop.
That's happened. That's happened. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually one day, the bass was so focused on keeping stuff out of its nest, I literally bopped a bass in the head with a Ned rig.
Mm-hmm.
And all it did is pick it up, drop it, 20 feet from the nest, and then right back to the nest and back in its position. And they do not. But
And you'll
those
catch
baits
that.
that he was talking about, the jerk bait, that's a perfect bait because that bait stays in that strike zone. So that's why you catch a lot of fish on jerk baits, because if you're over a bed and you're popping that bait and that bait just, but it's staying there, it's not leaving, that's going to make that bass mad, and he's going to come up and kill it because he wants
Yep.
it away from his nest.
Yeah. So you'll still catch those fish that are guarding the beds. I mean,
Yep.
and that's a whole topic that it's almost like you don't want to talk about because it's like, is it
That's
ethical?
it's gonna create some controversy for sure.
Right.
Some guys
But
really hate it, but
but I
my
do.
personal opinion on that, and I'll throw this out there,
Yeah.
is if you do it properly, it's okay to bed fish. But what I mean by properly is I caught that fish. Picture water.
Back in. And you
Don't
watch
put
them
it in
go
your
back.
live well. Don't call your mom and talk about the fish. Don't do a live stream with the fish. Hold it up, snap a photo, put it gently back in the water. Don't throw it.
Yeah. And these
And it's
fish
going to go
tend to,
back to that bed. Don't drive away. Literally catch it,
yeah.
put it back in the water. If you do that, you're fine. If you throw it in your live well, you screw around with it, you could hurt it. I mean, you could ultimately make that bass not able to spawn.
Mhm. So that's also gets into another topic, which would help having a biologist on with us. But if you're new to fishing um, and you do end up landing a bass that we're talking about, it's how to handle a bass, right?
Yeah.
So avoid the gills. Don't puncture eyes. Bass don't have teeth. They have little grips around their lips. Okay, it's almost like a mouth guard that just has grips on it right around the lips. So you can handle them with your hands. Even the biggest, like my PB or peacocks, which isn't
Yep.
even technically a bass species but a cichlid, super aggressive fish, but the mouths are made like bass, and they'll flop in your hand and they'll try to get out. They'll never cut your hand. I mean, you'll see like it's as if you're going like this with sandpaper on your hand,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't really hurt. So in terms of handling it, you don't have to hurt them, especially. Okay, we're not. They chances are they're not going to swallow the hook, unless it's a freaking hog and you're fishing with a crankbait and it swallows the hook.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a whole other different topic. But handling the fish, I mean, don't keep it out of the water for a long, like short amount of period as you can. Hold it from the mouth. Like I said, don't touch the gills inside the gill plate. I don't know any other advice that you can give for people who do land their first bass, hopefully because of the advice they're getting
Yeah.
here.
So the one thing that I see people do a lot is envision this as a bass. They hold it like this,
Yeah, that's a good
horizontal.
point. Yep.
So you got to think about the fact that when you're holding a bass, the most common way to hold a bass is stick your finger inside their mouth. And when you actually open their jaw, when their jaw is fully open, it actually causes them to calm down. They will stop thrashing once their mouth is open. But you've ultimately opened their mouth. So imagine somebody sticking their finger in your mouth and then trying to hold your whole body weight against your jawbone.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I hate when I see people holding a fish like this, because hold it straight up and down, because gravity is going to pull down on the back of that fish and you're dislocating its jaw. It doesn't seem like it because they stay still. And even when I hold fish, a lot of times I'll put my hand under their
Just hold
tail
exactly. That's another
so that
way.
I'm supporting that
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this for YouTube. So a lot of times I'm like photo, or I'm doing photos for tournaments where I'm holding it on the measuring board. But a lot of people have a tendency to hold it horizontally to make it look bigger or whatever they're trying to accomplish there. But I'll hold them horizontally, but you'll notice my hand is literally like, I'll do it with my water bottle. Like I'm holding it like this. So I'm supporting the whole weight of that back.
So you're
Because
getting the same angle of the fish just without
right.
hurting its jaw. Yeah. Great
Now I
point.
will say, because we brought up pike already, don't try to lip a pike.
Yeah.
You will learn to regret that really, really fast. For pike, what I recommend is using those plastic, not the metal ones, the plastic lip grippers.
Mm-hmm.
Snap those in their mouth.
Okay.
Still hold them by the body and everything, even though they're slimy as hell and they're hard to hold on to. But if you stick your raw thumb in there, you're going to get shredded because they're going to shake their head and they basically got a mouthful of razor blades. And a lot of people don't know this, but pike actually have an enzyme in their mouth that helps prevent clotting. So if you ever wondered why when you get nicked by a pike, it bleeds like crazy, that's because
Yeah.
they actually have an enzyme in their mouth to prevent clotting so that when they kill their prey,
Okay.
it doesn't
Wow.
clot up.
Interesting. Yeah. So for you guys who don't know, it's basically a freshwater barracuda.
Yeah.
Like basically a pike. Like long story short. All right. Pike, bass. Then we could talk panfish. If you want to, I guess panfish. You don't have to get a different rod. In my
No.
opinion, you have your hook. Buy a jar of live worms, and there you go. All the panfish in the world done. Just live
All
worms.
you need,
Oh,
so that combo I was talking about.
yeah.
So you get that Shakespeare ugly stick, spinning reel. Throw some of these right here.
The eagle claws. Yep.
on there with a night crawler, and now you're panfish fishing. That's why I recommend using a spinning rod and reel to start out, because you can then take this setup right here, remove that EWG, tie one of these on. These things are like $2 a pack still. And if you want to get fancy, you throw a bobber on top of it and you can cast it out, or you can put a split shot sinker on it.
Mhm.
And before I get anybody in trouble, make sure you check your fishing laws, because in some places split shots are lead's illegal. So sometimes you got to use the tin ones, or make sure you check your regulations. But these right here, you can tie it on that same mono that you're using for your bass. You can tie a bobber on it, and you can grab a package of night crawlers and go to your local bank fishing spot and catch perch, bluegill, rock
Great
bass.
point. Anything. You can catch anything. Some of the biggest bass I've caught, and I've even caught pike on
Yep.
worms.
Yep.
Worms work for everything. I don't even know, and I've had this conversation with other fishermen here. I don't even know where bass see worms in their natural environment. I've never seen a worm just crawling in the water. Or are they falling off of trees into the water? I don't understand. But when any fish sees a worm, even the smallest little bluegill or pumpkin
They
seed,
come on
they're
glue.
gonna go up to it and try to just nibble at the hook, even if they're too
Yep.
small to get hooked. So really, the best bait if you're a beginner is a live night crawler, and I don't think
Yep.
anybody can argue with that.
No, it's incredible, the power of a night crawler. And like I said, he was just making that good point. Is I have literally been fishing on Lake Ontario, and I'm there salmon fishing. We're blowing off the lake. We're fishing in the marina because we can't go out in the big boat. My, at the time, 6-year-old nephew is using a spinning rod with a bobber and a night crawler. Me and my brother have Daiwa Tatulas with 13 fishing crankbaits with fluorocarbon. We're casting Yum Dingers, Senkos. We're using every single bait we own. Don't catch a goddamn thing. My 6-year-old nephew on a spinning rod, a bobber, and a night crawler pulls a 5-pounder out of the marina. Same
There you go.
area.
Yep.
Me and him have 3 times his lifetime worth of experience fishing, but he caught it on a night crawler. So everybody disparages like the live bait and like the night crawler deal, but to be honest,
It's not cheating.
worked, and it always will work. It's
And
just a thing.
it's not like you're cheating as a fisherman. Maybe because you're not allowed live bait when you're fishing a tournament. And even at that, I
Right.
think saltwater tournaments you are, but we're not talking about saltwater here.
Right.
But like just personal experience, like same thing like you, we've also been fishing since we're young with night crawlers. We know they work for everything. But like last summer, I was done my day on Lake Champlain and I was just trolling maybe in like 20 feet of water, trolling on the slowest speed. And I have a night crawler with a little split shot on top, and I caught my PB smallmouth.
Yep.
I didn't have a scale on me, and actually, it was the main motivation for buying my Rapala scale now. But that thing, not even kidding, was close to 7 pounds easily
Yep.
on a night crawler.
I
And a
think
small
some of
snout.
it's scent. I
It
actually
has to
think
be.
some of it's scent.
It has to be, but it's like I've tried scents before, like minnows, or even they have a night crawler scent that you could put on any type of hard bait or soft
Yep.
bait, whatever. I don't
Yep.
think it's like the real thing.
No, I've actually, to be honest, I've tested this. I've actually put night crawlers in all my plastics, just
Yeah.
on a pure experiment, just to see if the scent would rub off on them, and I didn't see any difference. But yeah, there's something about night crawlers that just, and the good thing about night crawlers is, honestly, depending on where you live, just go outside when it rains. You don't have to
Yeah.
buy them.
Exactly.
You
So
can
really,
grab them. You can grab them out of your yard. Like, I know a lot of guys that'll actually go to golf courses and they'll come up out of the ground in the sand traps at golf courses, and they'll just like be laying in the sun,
mhm,
and you just
exactly.
go pick them up and bring them out fishing with you.
So that's like the epitome of fishing on a budget.
Yeah, because you just need a rod reel and the bait
Night
that you
crawl,
go
yeah.
collect.
Yeah, and there's videos on how to cast spinning reels. Useless for us to make a video on that because I mean we'll be on like the 50th page on YouTube when you search it up. So I mean, that being said, is there anything else that you'd like to discuss, or you just go down rabbit holes? Up to you. I don't know if you have any questions on your comments there. Did anybody say anything? I can't see yours.
Yeah, no one's really commented on mine recently, but I think the biggest thing I want to bring up is like, don't get sold by the flashy advertising. Think about what works in your body of water. So when you're watching a YouTube video, and that's actually why I created my channel, was when you watch a YouTube video, you have to take into perspective, where is this guy fishing? What part of the country is he fishing? What time of the year is he fishing? Because what will happen is if you pull up a YouTube video, for example, if you pull up any of my fishing videos right now, and you're fishing in the spring and you watch my videos, think about the time of year, because I usually try to mention it's midsummer. This is what we're doing. The reason why I do that is because a lot of people will watch a YouTube video and go, oh, he's using a jerkbait. I'll try using a jerkbait. If it's the middle of July, a jerkbait's not going to be nearly as effective as it is in the spring.
Nope.
And if you're from California, the spawn's starting in a month. Here in the Northeast, we got a couple months before we can even get on open water.
Exactly.
And the bait fish in Tennessee, the bait fish in Florida, is shad, is a different bait than it is up here. So you'll hear the term match the hatch a lot.
Yep.
Don't buy all these fancy colors because a guy on YouTube told you. Think about the body of water you're trying to fish. Do some research. Go online. See what panfish are there. Because for the most part, your bass are eating your panfish. They're eating your perch. They're eating your bluegill. If there is shad or anything like that, they're eating them and they're eating craws. So if you can figure out that they're predominantly the species of fish that are in the body of water are yellow perch, then buy baits that are green, maybe a little bit of orange in them to simulate a yellow perch.
Yep.
If your predominant bait is bluegill, well, then you can get away with like the darker greens with a little bit of blue flake, things like that. That's where, if you know what's in the body of water, then use that. Don't buy the damn bubblegum pink Yamamoto Senko at $8 a package and then buy the one that has 17 different colors laid into it, and the one with the rabbit hole you can go down with color, as I guess where I'm trying to go with this is, there's a green pumpkin, there's a green pumpkin black fleck, there's a green pumpkin chartreuse fleck, there's a green pumpkin. You don't need them all. Pick one that you think looks good, because this sport is more about confidence than it is about the color of that bait.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, you have to be confident in the baits you're using. And part of that confidence comes from doing your research, as you mentioned. We have so many resources in 2023. We have YouTube where you could search up, okay, bass fishing Vermont, all kinds of videos on YouTube. Not enough. We'll supply you guys with those soon.
Exactly.
But all kinds of videos, and then you look at the date that they're published and say, okay, this time of the year, as you mentioned, he's using this. You have Vermont Fish and Wildlife state access points, like you showed me, and on those lakes, it actually shows you the species of fish. So now you have the species, and you have lures that those fish are biting at different times of the year because you're doing your research. And fishing is really like this big. It's like a big puzzle that you're trying to put together to have the best chances to target the certain species that you're trying to target. So it's like the behavior, time of year, which is where are they at this time of year, and that's their behavior. So it all ties into one, and that's the big puzzle of fishing and understanding the fish more than getting these flashy baits or these flashy lures. If you know what they're eating, you can tie it on a piece of rope and throw it in, and you'll catch a fish. Now that's bare minimum, but you go to places like islands where they are not as fortunate as us, and you see it, and they're catching like huge red snappers, and then you have the guys off the coast of Florida that are using the $600 rod and reel to catch the same fish.
Yep.
I don't know if I get the point across clearly there. If you want to add on that, but I can't say it enough. I can't say it.
To be honest, the biggest thing I can say is that with the puzzle thing, I think that's what I want to kind of. It's not a puzzle. So it is a puzzle, but the puzzle changes every day and sometimes every couple of hours.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to understand when you're fishing, the one thing about this sport that's different is if you wake up in the morning and it's dead calm, there's no wind, and it's cold, then it gets hot, then the wind picks up. That is 3 different categories and 3 different puzzles now.
Right.
The biggest thing you can do to help yourself catch more fish is to mentally remember areas and situations. So when you
Mhm.
catch a fish, it's not just about, oh, I caught a fish on that rock. I need to remember I caught that fish on a June bug worm on that rock, and it was 75 degrees with a south wind. And
Right.
that's the difference between, and I don't want to necessarily discourage anyone either, but understand when you're not catching fish and other people are, that happens to everyone. So you have to understand that we're not going to put a video up of us fishing for 45 minutes and not catching fish because you're not going to watch it. But it happens all the time.
All the
We're not
time.
catching fish every cast. We're not catching fish by the bucket loads every time we go out. We're just showing you the videos of us catching fish. And just to give you an idea, I have 6 terabytes of raw footage on my computer that's just me casting and reeling with no fish catches in it. It's
Right.
hours and hours and hours. So it's
But
not something that you're not going to catch a fish every time you go out. It's just not going to happen. There's days it's just going to be bad.
it's a great point. Just get out there,
Yep.
get the experience. Why do you know all these things? Because you've done it. You've had those days of not catching, and then you'll catch when you're and it's I mean, when you catch one and you haven't been catching all day, that's the one you remember, and you remember
Yep.
how you caught it and where you caught it. It's like that mental imprint that sticks there. But the only way to get those experiences is by experiencing it and getting
Yep.
out there. So that's another thing. Like John B. I don't know if you know John B, like famous
Yep.
YouTuber. He always says
Yep.
never stop fishing. If it's something you want to get into, like anything else, like you really need the experience to become a really successful fisherman. But we're talking about the bare minimum now. But yeah, you really need a lot of experience to successfully catch fish in any different situation. Like you're mentioning, some days have 3, even 4. If it starts raining on that day, then that's a 4th situation that you're encountering that you
Yep.
need to have reference points from other days out on the water of how to target those fish in that scenario.
The whole fishing on a budget thing. So you have
Right.
your rod, your reel, your worm, you're out at the dock. Guess what? That experience is free. Doesn't cost you a damn thing. And I'm gonna tell you right now, you're not gonna catch fish from the couch.
Nope.
And I will tell you, weather conditions, that's another thing I want to reiterate. Be safe. Please be safe. But rain, fish will bite. Cold, fish will bite. Windy, not windy. There isn't a condition that fish absolutely will not bite. There is situations where they will bite less or
Hmm.
more, but if you only have 4 hours on Saturdays to fish, use those 4 hours.
Plenty. That's plenty.
Like if it's something that I think a lot of guys I talk to, they're like, "Oh wow, it's gonna rain tomorrow, so I'm not gonna go." It's like, well, do you have rain gear? Can you go? Because if you can, even if you don't catch fish, don't chalk it up as, oh, it's a bad day and I suck at fishing. Chalk it up to, okay, what did you do?
Right.
Okay, you went to the bank, you cast towards the pillars of the bridge, and you didn't catch fish. Well, maybe next time you don't go to that bank, or maybe you go further down that bank. Maybe that next time in those conditions they don't bite there, but they might be biting on the other side.
And before I forget this point, when you get out there and it is raining, or for the reason why you didn't want to go and you still get out there, and then you end up catching one, the feeling and the experience you get from that, because what happens is you're eliminating those days where you thought in the past you couldn't fish, to now you're having successful fishing days because of that day that you learned how to catch it on the day that you didn't want to go.
Yep. There's nothing more rewarding than waking up being groggy as hell, looking outside and seeing that rain and being like, ugh, should I go? You know what? I'm going to go. And I will admit, I was one of those guys. I used to avoid it because I was like, nah, they're not going to bite today, whatever. As funny as it is, YouTube is why I've learned this experience, because as someone who wants to create content, sometimes I go fishing even when I think, it's probably going to suck today, but maybe I can go. And the other thing you can do, which is actually probably more important than catching fish. So you're going out on a day. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've literally gone out on a day where I don't necessarily even expect to catch fish. Bad conditions, right? Whatever. The conditions are awful. I just practice. Screw it. I don't think I'm going to catch fish. I'm going to throw a jerk bait and learn how to work a jerk bait today.
Absolutely.
I've got a bait that I've never tried before that I want to play around with this new bait I bought. Screw it. If the fish aren't biting, I try the stuff that I'm supposed to, that the textbook says should work. And if that doesn't work, then I'll grab that weird bait out of my tackle box and learn how to fish it. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't catch any fish, and I've used this and it sounds cliche as hell, but even if you don't catch fish, you can catch knowledge. You can learn how to use a lipless, learn how to use a chatterbait, learn how to fish a square bill, learn how to cast better. Even if it's something as simple as working on your pinpoint casting so that you can hit your spots easier.
Yeah, and not only that, it's all psychological because you actually end up catching fish.
Yeah.
You do.
You'd be
You do.
surprised.
I'm usually surprised when I go out and it's raining and windy.
Yep.
Sometimes the fish are on fire, but it's more getting the hours under your belt and just being out there. And like you said, the experience is free and you're learning for when it is that perfect condition day. Well, now you know how to use that jerk bait because you know the fish are feeding on jerk baits in that specific scenario, like the early spring.
Yep.
And it's not going to be your first time working it. So you're not working it in a weird way that fish don't want to bite it, but rather you have that pattern ingrained in your head and you're ready to go.
Yep. Yeah. It's an invaluable lesson that you can just, it's free. You're there. That's the beauty of fishing, is that realistically you can spend $60, buy your fishing license, and you're good.
Yep.
All you need now is earthworms that you get for free, or some $3 plastic worms that you buy in a 30 pack that are probably going to last you for a while, and just go.
Yeah, and you know, another point is the passion behind it. Like we said, both of us are not sponsored, but we're here talking for almost an hour now about fishing on a budget, which we both don't even necessarily do, but we try to do. We try to
I
do.
tried it.
We're
Yeah.
kind of learning from our experiences to try to teach you guys that you don't have to do what we did, the initial cost that we put into it. So and the drive thing and passion can relate to anything in life. People who go to the gym, people who start books, start writing books, whatever it is. You just get out there and you're doing it, and already that's 80% of the work. Really, really. I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like there's a couple other things we can add into that.
The biggest thing I want to add is anyone who has, so this live thing is kind of a new thing for both of us, but what I really want this to become, and what I created my channel for, was I wanted to build a fishing community. I wanted to build pages where people can ask questions, share information. I am an open book. If you want an idea, a spot, anything like that, don't hesitate to message both of us.
Yep.
Comment on the video down below. And if you have a topic you would like us to talk about, to be honest, it's going to sound elitist in a way, but once you've done this sport for a long time, it's hard to think of topics that people that are beginning might want to hear. Because I've literally had people ask me things that in my mind, I'm like, you don't know that? Because I grew up fishing. I grew up as a fisherman's son. So tying a knot, putting how to start fishing with a spinning rod. You do that in my family when you're 3 years old, 4 years old. But for some people, they just discovered fishing.
And that's more people
They
on my
just
channel.
discovered Yeah.
Because I got a lot of people who check out my channel and they're from the city, and it's very different. The Vermont folks are generally outdoors people. I mean, it's one of the most rural states in the U.S., so that just gives it away. A lot of these people hunt and fish. Are you a hunter as well? You do a bit of hunting. You used to.
I used to. So it's funny. So hunting used to be the main thing I did. It's kind of it's kind of crazy, like thinking about like the fact that I have a YouTube fishing channel. I really just started passionately bass fishing about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I have been fishing my whole life, and I've been mostly trout, salmon fishing, doing the deep sea trolling style fishing. And I did a lot of hunting when I was younger. And then bass fishing kind of took it over. And I actually had to have surgery a couple years ago. This hernia surgery, nothing serious, but I couldn't hunt because I couldn't move around.
Mhm.
And I didn't really miss it, to be honest, because I like chasing bass way more than deer hunting. It's just, I guess,
Yep.
my own personality. But um, hunting is just one of those things that I guess I didn't really get into as much as
Okay.
when I went down the rabbit hole for bass fishing, it was just all over. And
Yeah.
honestly, going on the fishing on a budget, I couldn't afford to do both.
Hmm. That's a great
So
point.
I kind of allocated funds to fishing only.
No, but that's it. Even if you're new to fishing, like we gave you a lot of information here, but it's also depending on what you want to target, you're going to need different things. So we won't get into it, right? Today we spoke generally about bass and pike and the predator fish. But I mean, trout is still considered a predator, and you need completely different things if you're trying to target trout. You can still, don't get me wrong, you need a spinning reel with a hook and a worm. You can still target trout, but then there's the whole fly fishing world. So it's like you're saying with the hunting thing, it just depends what you want to do, really.
Yep.
Um, Another point with sharing the spots, I don't care to share spots, and I'll tell you why. As long as you have etiquette, good fishing etiquette, everyone can have a piece of the pie. And years
Yep.
down the road, those fish will still be there. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I've caught the same rock bass 3 days in a row. Okay, it's strenuous on the fish. That's because I'm going in the same spot. Now you could say that that's not ethical. But generally, if you're taking care of these fish and you're allowing them to reproduce because of the handling, I don't care to share the spot. Now, if you post a picture of you holding a chain of largemouth like this in the middle of May and you want to know where I'm fishing, sorry, bud.
Yeah.
Like it's very simple. It's very
Yeah.
logical. Share your thoughts
I
on
will
that.
say if I'm fishing in a tournament, I'm not sharing spots with you. But after the tournament, I'll tell you where I caught them because I'm probably not going back there again until next year.
Sure.
But you can catch. It's really weird, but you can catch. So I actually have a video. I wish I knew which one it was, to be honest, but I actually caught a 5.5 pound bass off a dock. There was like one of those like milk jug floats where they tie their boat off to it on the side of the boat, on the side of the dock.
Yep.
Captain a Senko in there, caught a 5 pounder. Went back there the next day, and I know it was the same 5 pounder because he still had the hole in his lip from where I caught him, and he had a lamprey mark.
Okay.
Same fish, 2 days in a row, the exact same spot. When it comes to sharing spots, and this is going to sound like the most egotistical thing I've ever said on a live stream or video. If I share my spot with you and you go catch fish, I'm just going to go find them somewhere else. You can't catch all the fish in the lake. There's been
Oh,
studies done on bass fishing, and if you actually look at when they do bass fishing surveys and they do the electrofishing and stuff like that,
oh yeah.
there is thousands of bass in that lake. There's not 10, there's not 20. They actually say, and I don't know how much I believe this, again, it's one of the reasons why I want to have a biologist on here, but they
Right.
say, depending on the body of water, if it's a healthy fishery, you can't hurt the bass population.
There you go.
You
And
can't do it.
that's another
That's what they
point.
say.
Bass are such a hardy species of fish. Compare bass to trout, you can't really. You might find them in the same places, especially creeks and streams in Vermont. But how delicate they are, how fragile they are, completely different ballgame. And like the point you were saying, how there's thousands of fish. Yeah, there could be 10 pounders that you will never see for their
Yep.
entire rest of their life, and they'll die in the middle of the lake.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like deep
Never,
down,
never seen a human.
no, no. In the summer, they won't even come into the shallows. They'll come
Yep.
up the spawn quickly, maybe even a bit deeper than the smaller ones will, and then they'll just stay in there. So yeah,
I'll
that's a
admit,
great
some
point to
guys are
make.
really guarded about their spots.
Yeah.
Some guys are really like territorial. And again, I will again reiterate this. When you see a video about me fishing a tournament, that
Mhm.
tournament was a month ago. I'm not putting out live footage of me pre-fishing for a tournament because I know the guys I'm competing against are going to use that information. I would use that information. It's not like they're being jerks. If I found some guy that was live streaming and fishing the body of water in the tournament I'm going to fish in, and he starts talking about where the fish are, I'm probably going to go check those spots out
Yep.
too. It's just competitive nature. But at the same time, when I see someone at the boat ramp, if you see me at a boat ramp, now another thing I will say, just an ego thing. If you see me at a boat ramp, you recognize me from a live stream or anything, come up to me and talk to me, and I'll be happy to tell you. I'll tell guys when I'm leaving the ramp, I'll say, hey, there's a big tree out in the middle, about 30 yards off the boat ramp, black and blue Senkos
Yep.
off the front branch. I'll tell guys that because as far as I'm concerned, I want this community to grow. I want bass fishing to continue. And the more fishermen there are, the more products that are going to come out, the more industry there's going to be around those products because there's going to be a market for those products that only helps us. And as a YouTuber, I get more viewers that want to watch my content.
Not only that,
I'll learn how to find fish. I'm not worried about
exactly.
finding new fish. Actually, if anything, and I don't know about you, my favorite thing about bass fishing, obviously, it's catching them. But my favorite thing about bass fishing is learning about how to outsmart the bass. Like when you have those days where you're just not catching them and you just stop and you go, okay, here's the conditions, here's the puzzle pieces I have.
Mhm.
And then when you just put that puzzle together and hook one fish, doesn't matter if it's a 8 pounder or an 8 incher.
Yeah.
When you catch that fish, it's like scoring a goal in soccer, scoring a touchdown in football, scoring a goal in hockey. It's like that epitome of all these little things come together to that fish, and it's a celebration in your head. And that's what
Absolutely.
fishing is for me. It's about learning
Yep.
every day and just picking up more knowledge.
And the biggest thing for me, maybe because I'm from the city, is trying to discourage people from being on these things all day.
Yep.
Get out in nature. Just by
Yep.
fishing, you're there for a couple of hours and you're out in nature, breathing in the fresh air. Learning about nature because I mean, how much do you learn about bass when you're fishing for them and their behavior, like you're saying? So yes, it is very rewarding when you land those fish, especially if you're new to it and still and you get it's as like you dig into it and you keep fishing. It's like the reward just keeps getting higher when
Yep.
you catch a fish and it doesn't matter the size. It's weird, but it's like the opposite of what people think. Like, oh, okay, you've been doing this all day. You've been doing this your whole life. You catch a bass, and you're still excited. Yup, more
Yeah.
than ever, buddy. More than
Absolutely.
ever. Yeah. So it ends up turning into a passion that'll never die for myself, and I think it's the same thing for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's crazy because, like you said, it's a weird mentality
It's like a
because it's
paradox.
not that I don't go to the lake. And now, granted, I'm from Vermont. If
Hmm.
you're from Texas, if you're from Florida, your perspective on a big bass is probably different than my perspective on a big bass. But at the end of the day, if I catch 8, 10 inch bass, that's 8 fish. That's eight
Yep.
creatures that I interacted with in nature that I, in my mind, outsmarted, got to bite my bait, got to take a picture with it. And honestly, there is some days where I have a crappy week at work. I'm stressed out. I've had a long week. Fishing is my reset place. And for a
Absolutely.
lot of people, you don't realize that like our society is so connected to electronics. It's so involved with stimuli all the time. But when you're bass fishing, it's just you, your rod, and the fish.
That's
And it
it.
gives you that opportunity to just reset your life, reset for a few moments, an hour, 2 hours. If you're ridiculous like me, 16 hours.
Yeah,
But it's something where you can take that moment, be in nature, enjoy the birds, enjoy the wind, enjoy the sun on your face, and try to just catch a fish. And that's all you need to worry about. You don't
right.
need to worry about your mortgage payment, your car payment, whether you're going to have food on the table for that hour to 10 hours or whatever. You can just be like, me, fish. That's the only thing I need to worry about. And honestly, it's helped me a lot personally. I started really heavily fishing during COVID when everything
Mhm.
was shut down and you couldn't do anything. And that's when I really started really ramping up the YouTube channel. But it's also it's not just a sport to catch fish, it's also a peace of mind for a lot of fishermen.
Oh, that's probably the biggest thing for me. I mean, it's better for you than any other type of disconnection from reality that you can
Yep.
get else in a bottle or a pill bottle. That's
Yep.
you know what I mean? So I don't know, just being out with nature. I get it is a passion, but like I said, the passion grows once you start.
Yep.
My brother is someone that I never thought would be a fisherman. Never. And now it's literally his favorite thing to do. Why? Because the more you learn to love it, from my
Yep.
experience. And like, look, I started off whatever doing pan fishing stuff. Then I went on to making my own soft plastics, as you do yourself. Now I started
Mhm.
the Instagram account, the YouTube, and the main reason, like he's saying, is to share and grow the community. I started my YouTube channel to show people what I'm doing during the day because they'd be like, "Oh, where are you going for a couple of hours?" Well, this is what I'm doing. And it's like, "Oh, this is actually cool. This is fun." Well, I encourage that. Come out with me, learn. Um, just be with nature. I don't have that much else to say really. You
No,
want to
I think
comment
that's
on that?
pretty much it for here. Like I said, though, if you guys have any questions, any topics, that is the lifeblood of a content creator is you guys saying, hey, I really wish you would do a video on that.
Yep.
We'll do it. Like, especially at this time of year, because I can't fish. I know you probably have the same situation that everything's iced over. I don't do a ton of ice fishing. I see you do a little bit here or there, but
I enjoy it. It's just right
it
now I don't want to take the chances.
this year has been awful, like the conditions.
Terrible.
I was actually supposed to go fishing yesterday morning. I didn't go.
Yep. No. Hell no.
The conditions are not good and it's risky. So for us, being able to come on here and talk fishing is great, but if I can provide something that somebody wants, like specific details on a topic, we're gonna try to do these. And I'm making a commitment on a live stream right now. It's probably a stupid commitment to make on a live stream, but I would like to try to do these once a week, if not every other week, and just
Yep.
come on and talk fishing.
Hmm.
But to be honest,
The thing is,
I
yep.
could go on a rabbit hole every week for an hour every week, but it may not be what you want to know. So if you want to learn something, you want to know how to do things, we can do a seminar on tying knots. It doesn't really matter,
No.
but we can come on and bring you content because at the end of the day, it's a weird give and take. I'm making content for you that you'll enjoy watching. And in turn, when people watch my videos, I don't know about you, but I watch my analytics. And when I'm like, oh my God, 40 people watched my video today. In the
Hmm.
scope of YouTube, that's nothing. But to me, that's huge. That means 40 people actually took time to watch something I made. And that's what it's all about for me. It's not about
Yep.
making money. It's not
No.
about somebody throwing money at me to get promote a product. It's literally you watching my videos is my currency and I get to share knowledge. And if you catch fish, the other thing I really like, if you catch fish, comment, send us a picture. Matter of fact, if you
Absolutely.
catch a fish using a technique we've talked about on
Oh
live,
yeah.
we'll put it on here.
We'll put it on the next live stream.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If we're providing you any type of value towards your fishing experience, that is the main goal. This is pure passion right here. There is no goal of monetary. If that comes, so be it. We're gonna be here anyways doing what we're doing because we enjoy it. It comes as cherry on the cake or cherry on Sunday, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
No, but that's what it comes down to. We're gonna be here anyways, but if we could provide value of content for the viewer, then why not? So be it.
Yep.
So like he said, leave your comments. We always want to have extra comments, other things to talk about. We could go on rabbit holes forever. We might have to limit ourselves sometimes for when we get extra comments, because we could talk 15, 20 minutes about one little comment that comes in.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm excited for what's to come. We already have topics that we will be discussing, but we can even add wives during the week if we like a comment and we see that it can give us a lot of something to talk about.
Yep. And if you don't think comments work, guys, that's how me and him met. Facebook posts, talking to each other about fishing. Exactly. Yep, we can wrap up here. Again, guys, thank you for watching. I know on yours, I can see how many people have been on yours. There's been 3 or 4 on yours. And that's one thing I do want to, before we sign off, I do want to explain there is 2 live streams. So right now, we're live streaming on my channel and the Bear Fishing channel at the same time. So eventually, once we get this thing rolling, like we said, we're not sponsored. In order to do one big happy stream, it actually costs money. So we're doing a separate stream right now. So if you see me typing, but you don't see anything in the chat, that's why. There is a little bit of magic happening in the background. But just be aware that there is 2 different channels. Everybody on my channel, go check out his channel. I've been watching his videos. They're pretty cool. It's all about sharing and growing this community as a whole. But honestly, we're teamed up. We're brother channels at this point, and we're going to continue to create content, share information, and maybe we'll get big enough to be able to do this as one big live stream. But just understand that there is 2 different things going on in case you're curious as to why you're hearing me typing, but you're not seeing a response.
Absolutely. No, and another thing is our journey together, we will be fishing. There is a lot of content that we will be doing together in the future.
Yep. No, I think that's about it. We'll definitely be back. We're gonna try to figure out some sort of regular schedule. We'll post it out, let you guys know when we're gonna go live. We work full-time jobs, so it's not always gonna necessarily be the same day, but we'll try to get you guys notified when we're gonna go live, and we'll be back for more content for sure. Thanks, guys. We will be back with another episode very shortly. Give us some comments, and it may be your topic.